Good morning, Bucknutters. Welcome to the Bucknuts Morning 5 here on Friday, June 3rd, 2022. I am Dave Biddle. I'm very happy to be joined by Steve Helwagen. All right, Steve, the big news from yesterday. Ryan Day met with a group of roughly about 100 business leaders from the Columbus area, and I'm sure around Ohio. I'm sure it wasn't just limited to business leaders in Columbus. And he threw the number out there of exactly what he thinks Ohio State. I'm sure they crunched the numbers. He wasn't just giving a rough estimate here, speaking off the top of his head. He said for Ohio State to keep their current roster intact each year, they're going to need about $13 million. And again, this has nothing to do with recruiting. This is just to keep other programs from poaching their current players. They need these NIL deals in place so they can take care of guys like Travion Henderson, CJ Stroud, and guys like that, and whoever those guys will be going forward in the future years. Your thoughts about that? I know a lot of people are like, whoa, $13 million a year. But when you think about it, you have 85 scholarship kids. Kids can transfer now with no penalty. Kind of makes sense to me, Steve.
Yeah, it's a very interesting topic and conversation. And I think that Ryan Day is being proactive to get out in front of this. And it's kind of like, send us your dimes and your nickels because we're going to need them type thing. And Ohio State's in a very tough spot because, okay, they spend $200 million a year on athletics. And a lot of that is brought in through fundraising, hitting up donors, hitting up corporations, corporate sponsors, and everything else that goes with it. But they also now need support for the athletes. And that is a very interesting topic. And I think that there is a certain segment of the fan base, and it's certainly understandable that, you know, when you mention name, image, and likeness, it just kind of, glosses over the front of their face like, I can't believe this. Why isn't a scholarship good enough for these guys? And I think that him coming out and dropping such an astronomical number as 13 million kind of puts it out there in the proper perspective, I think, for fans that if you're going to follow college football into the 2020s and into the 2030s and the 2040s, you need to understand that it's not 1997 anymore, and that there are going to need to be some accommodations put in place for these high-end athletes. And that's just the fact of the matter. And I think we're still awaiting NCAA legislation to really codify what is and what is not legal. But I think it's going to err more toward more is legal than illegal. And so these major programs, Alabama, Clemson, Texas, I throw them in there because they've got deep pockets. Anybody who you feel has got deep pockets and crazy boosters and, crazy donors, it's going to become a bit of a bidding war. So you hate to see this sport go the way of the Yankees, the Red Sox, and the Dodgers, but it's already kind of gone the way of the Yankees, the Red Sox, and the Dodgers, because you can put 4 or 5 schools in a hat and pretty much assure that one of them is going to win the national championship every year between the ones I mentioned and maybe Georgia. So, it is crazy. I think there's no reason why. I said this with Lawrence, the guy from Clemson, a couple of years ago. Had it been in place when he was there, he would have been a $2, $3, $4 million a year guy, I think. I mean, there's no reason why he's not featured as part of a national advertising campaign throughout all of the ABC and Fox games all season long with Dr. Pepper or whoever. So I think CJ Stroud, would look awful good driving one of those Heisman Nissans, So how about getting one before he wins this year's Heisman? Have him and Eddie George and Troy Smith in a Nissan Heisman. So there you go.
Yeah, we have a commenter, Darren, saying, "Isn't this more like you just can't handle the truth?" I think he's talking about the people that are upset about it. Yeah, I mean, I think that's a legit comment there. Yeah, as Steve said, I mean, you just have to embrace it and be proactive, and that's what Ryan Day is doing. We had some people on our Bucknuts message board saying, "Oh," one guy said, "Oh, this is quote unquote gross. I can't believe this is going on." It's like, first of all, if Ryan Day wasn't doing this, if he was not being proactive, if he was not setting up these meetings, and Gene Smith also was at this meeting with these business leaders and laying it out, the blueprint, what they need. If he wasn't being proactive, Steve, what would every Buckeye fan be saying right now? Why isn't Ryan Day working harder at this? How is he letting Ohio State fall behind? So I applaud Ryan Day. I'm sure he doesn't want to do these things, but he knows he has to. And he was quoted as saying, everything that since he's been the head coach at Ohio State, he knows he has to embrace these types of things. And I think he's doing a good job of that.
I agree. And I think that, you look at Gene Smith, he's been in college athletics probably 40 years now. And, his time as the athletic director probably winding down the next 3 to 5 years, whatever. He's done a really good job since coming on in 2004. And they've tried to stay ahead of the curve as best as they could and kind of confront things and as they're coming, down the track at them. And this is the latest hurdle and the latest challenge. But again, from an industry-wide standpoint, I think about how we don't have proper leadership. And we talked about this, about the Fisher Saban thing a week ago, that we don't have proper leadership to put rules in place for guidance. And again, like Dabo said, we're going through transition 3-4 years. We're going to come out of this on the other side in a better place, because I don't want to say this game is indestructible, but it's nearly indestructible. When you think about in the fall, the stadiums are going to be full, and anybody who wants to play college football, there's spots on every one of these teams. And if one kid gets his nose out of joint, then the next kid steps up and replaces him. I mean, that's the thing. There's 7,000 high schools nationally, and hundreds of thousands of kids playing high school football who would, die to take your spot tomorrow if you are mad about your NIL. So that's the one thing that they have, is an endless array of talent to replace the ones that leave. So that it's like Chris Holtmann. I mean, he's kind of coming to grips with it as well, between the transfer portal and guys going to the NBA. Like Branham was an unexpected, jump off to the NBA. You have to have a constant churn of talent, and you need to be locked in where that talent is coming from with the AAU programs and so on. And so it's the same thing with football as well.
We have a question for you, Steve. Probably the last one we'll get to with this NIL stuff. We have some other stuff we want to get to, but the Buckeye guy says, Mr. Helwagen, if you were the Big Ten or NCAA commissioner, what rule or rules would you change as far as NIL?
Yeah, good question. I think that, again, just common sense, and I think that it needs to err in favor of the student athlete, which student athletes now have it better than they've ever had it before, because they can collect NIL and they can move from one college to the next. So I would keep it very pro-athlete friendly to avoid lawsuits, because there's going to be a class action lawsuit at some point to change some of this, whatever it may be. And you want to kind of head that off so that, again, your industry doesn't get turned on its ear. But I do believe it wasn't intended to be an inducement for kids coming out of high school to choose colleges. And I don't know how you codify that. And I think that's the probably the one area that they're going to have a real problem with, is because, again, it's the free open market. If a college kid who's 18 years old can accept money, why can't a high school kid who's 18 years old? There's really no differentiation other than he hadn't enrolled yet or hasn't signed a letter of intent. So I don't know. I guess I'm going to get deeper into this and listen to more of what people have to say. But, you think about the Big Ten already had a very lucrative television contract. And as we understand, they're coming up with a new one. And you don't know what the timing of this is. It could come tomorrow. It could come in 3 months. We don't know. But at some point, Kevin Warren and whoever's in charge of this process is going to come out and tell you that over a X number of year period, the Big Ten is going to make $1.5, $2, $3, $4 billion, whatever it is. So there's a lot of money at stake and on the table. And the athletes at some point, should be realizing some of that if it's that much money. Of course, their league is different than the Big 12. They're not going to have that much money, particularly without Texas and Oklahoma. So what's fair? What's right? I don't know. We're just kind of feeling our way through the dark on all of this, and maybe one day they'll get it right.
All right, switching gears, I can't believe this. I kept saying there was a lot of smoke that, the Penn State game's not going to be a whiteout this year. It's not going to be at night. I'm like, I'll believe that when I see it. Now I see it. It has been announced it is not going to be a whiteout. It's not going to be at night. It's going to be a stripe out, either at noon or 3:30. The stripe out. I get you. Give me that over the whiteout for sure. And people can make fun of the whiteout and whatever. I know Ohio State went out there in 2018 with the big comeback. Dwayne Haskins, Ben Victor, KJ Hill with the high stepping into the end zone, that huge comeback in the fourth quarter. But every time they go over there, man, it's tough sledding when they do. Even when they win, it's tough sledding for that whiteout. So I'm thrilled that it's not going to be a whiteout, that it's not going to be at night. Your thoughts on that? Are you hearing it's going to be noon or 3:30?
I would assume noon, but to my way of thinking, Fox would have a World Series game at 8:00 that night. And what would make most sense to me is if they played the game at 3:30 or 4:00 as a lead-in to the World Series coverage, because that game is going to draw a huge rating, Ohio State versus Penn State. I know they like the noon games, but you also want to get as many eyeballs on that World Series as possible. So to me, it's a perfect synergy. Maybe they'll have another marquee game at 3:30 or 4:00 after Ohio State, Penn State. Penn State will have a pretty good team. They lost a lot of tight games. When you think about that, what they lost at home to Illinois in overtime or something stupid. They gave away a lot of games that they could have and should have won last year. And I think that they're going to be very tough, particularly at State College. My daughter saw that yesterday, and she is a sophomore at Miami, just finishing up her second year. And she said, "Dad, what's that song you guys always do over there about that?" And when she saw it wasn't going to be a whiteout, I go, you know how they do that. Da, 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 da. It was a whiteout. It was a whiteout, and they got their asses smoked. Da, 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 da. She goes, "Yeah, that's when Ohio State goes in there and beats them, isn't it?" And then she said, "Now, Ohio State lost one of those, didn't they?" I go, "Yes, they did. They had a blocked punt and a blocked field goal over there, and it was kind of like Penn State rumbled. I've been there when the stadium just literally, the erector set starts shaking, and you're wondering, are these steel girders, that came out of the toy box, are they going to hold this thing up? But
the giant erector set. I think we got our former colleague who now has been at 11 Warriors forever, Ramsey. Everybody knows Ramsey if you're a Buckeye fan, you're familiar with people who cover the team and write stories. Ramsey's hilarious. Years ago, he referred to Beaver Stadium as the giant erector set.
Yes.
That is perfect. They just keep adding to it. It does. It looks like a giant erector set.
And there's nothing within 250 miles of it in every direction either. I mean, it's this damn thing where you drive along out in the middle of nowhere for 3 hours, and then this huge erector set is just sitting there on the landscape. You're like, boy, that's out of place, isn't it? But yeah, people come from all around Pennsylvania on game days. And if you haven't been to a game at Penn State, you owe it to yourself to go see a game at Penn State. Those night games are a religious experience. I'll say that. But that's one of the top environments with Wisconsin. And then kind of the next tier, well, Nebraska is up there too. Dave, the support Nebraska gives their team for how bad they are. And again, they are like Charlie Brown and Lucy Van Pelt, where the ball is always there teed up for Charlie Brown to kick the field goal. And then at the last second, Lucy Van Pelt pulls the football away and Nebraska loses. So, that's kind of how Nebraska season went last year. It's kind of how Penn State season went last year. But, we'll get our fill of Happy Valley. I'm thinking probably in recent years, with it being a night game, we go over on Saturday morning. But I'm thinking this is going to be a noon game, going to need to be over there in place Friday night, and then maybe drive all the way back or stop off in Wheeling on the way home. So that might be the travel plan this year.
I will suggest Altoona, Pennsylvania is a place to stay. My
awesome.
My whole family is originally from Altoona, Pennsylvania. Now, I was born and raised in Ohio, but like my mom and dad were from Altoona. My aunts and uncles all were from Altoona, Pennsylvania. Fortunately, my dad did not somehow was not a college football fan growing up. So thank God, even though he grew up like 30 minutes away from Penn State, was not a Penn State fan. And he came to, was in the Air Force, got stationed. He was in, where was he in? Newark, Ohio at the time, and finished his degree at Ohio State, became an Ohio State fan. So that's how it all started. Even though my dad's from Altoona, Pennsylvania, he became a diehard Buckeye fan. Thanks to that.
We stay in Bedford sometimes, which is as you go over on the interstate is the last exit before you turn and go north to State College. It's about an hour and 10 minutes south of State College. So coming back to Ohio, it's perfect. You come back late Saturday night, stay there, and you get up Sunday, and then you've only got 3.5 hours or whatever back from there to get back. From my house on the east side of Columbus, I can be at State College in 4.5 hours usually if there's no bad construction or whatever. So it is construction season out there. Trust me.
Oh gosh, it's like driving to Indianapolis. Every time we go to Indianapolis, you think, it's a 3-hour drive, except it's probably a 5-hour.
Add drive. 2.
Exactly. My goodness gracious.
Hey, Dave, we're going to Indianapolis in just a matter of weeks. The Big Ten kickoff deal is going to be in Indianapolis like July 25th, something like that. So today's June 3rd. It'll be here before we know it.
All right, last thing. Let's have a little fun here. So I have a bet with up-and-coming superstar in our media business, Chris Drew. He's the co-host with Zach Smith on their Menace to Sports podcast. So we have a bet. I think Zach got in on it too. Over under 1,200 receiving yards for Marvin Harrison Jr. this season. And I almost feel bad that I'm taking the under.
Marvin.
I'm like a Marvin Harrison Jr. stan. I've been talking about it since last year. Like, this guy's going to be a stud. Like he showed out in the Rose Bowl. I think he's going to have a big year. But here's why I'm going under. We have a Roosters bet on the line. Chris is going over. Zach's going over. I'm going under. Here's why. There's just too much wealth to spread around. Jackson Smith and Jigba's going to get his. Marvin Harrison's going to get his. Emeka Egbuka's going to get his. Travion Henderson's going to get his. You're going to have to mix in some Mayan Williams and some Evan Pryor. Man, I could see Marvin Harrison Jr. going over 1,200. I think it's going to be close. And if they play in 15 games like we hope they do, making the national championship game, that'll make it easier for him to reach it. I'm going to go just under because I think it's going to be tough with Jackson Smith and Jigba and Emeka Egbuka and all of the running backs, all of the wealth they have to spread around. And there's going to be some blowouts where those guys are taken off the field. Where are you going, Steve? You going over or under 1,200 for Marv?
Yeah, that's my question, Dave. Can you tell me today if they're going to play 13, 14, or 15 games? Can you tell me? At
least 14.
At least
they're going to win the Big Ten championship, and they're going to make the playoff, and we'll see what happens from there.
Yeah, I like that thought. I would say under just because, again, when you spread those yards out to 3, 4, 5 guys, they thin out pretty quickly. And yet last year was uncanny with the number of 100-yard games. You would have sometimes 2 guys and even a few games where you had 3 guys with 100 yards receiving. And Stroud is a great distributor. He gets the ball. He always makes the right play. It seems like if it's to throw underneath and take what they give, he takes what they give him almost uncanny. I mean, it took him a game or 2 to kind of get his feet wet, but once he did, he was amazing. And Brian Hartline at the camp the other day, some kid made some amazing move, and he goes, "Oh my God, it's like Marvin." He it just came out of his mouth. My God, it was like Marvin, something like, I think he said that to Stroud, who was like standing next to him or whatever while these guys were running routes. And I was like, uh-oh, if Hartline is invoking a first name, Marvin on some great move or whatever, it tells me we're in for something special this fall. So this kid was born to do this. It was ingrained in him at a very young age. And like we say, a lot of kids who are the sons of coaches are so smart and whatever. Well, this is a guy who is the son of an NFL Hall of Famer and looks like he's going to be a great receiver in his own right. And he's got his own path to right. And this will be, the Rose Bowl was a great coming out party for him with 3 touchdowns. I think we're going to see some amazing things out of him. 1,200 yards, a lot to ask for. I mean, 1,200, you're asking him to get average of 80 or 90 a game to do that. So I don't know. That's because there's going to be some games where he comes back with 5 for 50, so that's just some days it doesn't roll your way, but I'd say under right now. But boy, it'd be fun to see him go over.
Sure would. Sure would. All right. Well, hey, great stuff from Steve Helwagen. Really appreciate it, Steve. And thank you to all the listeners out there for tuning into the show. We appreciate that very much. Hope everyone has a great day and a great weekend.